Hello everyone and welcome to WhiskyWars, where today we have one of the first World Whisky Wars that I've done on the channel. And we have a whiskey from Japan and a whiskey from South Africa. Both are bottled at 40% ABV. And the Japanese whiskey today is the Kyasuku whiskey. But this is... I don't really want to call it a Japanese whiskey because it's a whiskey that's been matured in Japan. So I'm not really sure on the correct terminology of that. And today we have another whiskey from South Africa. And this is a single grain whiskey, so I'd imagine it's going to be really sweet. So just starting off with the colour, obviously assume not natural colour and chill filtered. The Kyasuku is really pale and light, which you would probably assume from a Japanese whiskey. Whereas the South African whiskey, the Bains, is much darker, closer to resemblance to a bourbon in colour. I'll start off with the Bains. Actually, that's really interesting on the nose. I'm getting caramels, I'm getting brown sugar, so I'm thinking bourbon. But this doesn't also smell like a bourbon because there's another half to it that's really interesting and I can't actually put my finger on. So maybe this is what the South Africa influences on this whiskey. Really interesting. The Japanese whiskey is completely different. I'm getting more notes, but completely different ones. And initially I'm thinking of ginger as a spice. Now normally that's not a spice that I get a lot on whiskey. I'm getting ginger, I'm getting a lovely sweetness to it, but it's a really light sweetness. And I would want to call it like an icing sugar. Ginger and icing sugar. A little bit of white grape. And then I'm thinking like a sandalwood oil. It's not woody in the sense that it's not spicy, but there's something there that's really aromatic, and I'm thinking like a sandalwood or a cedarwood. And that is really nice on the nose. I really mean that. That is lovely. Very different to what I'm used to. It's light, it's refreshing, but there's enough going on there to keep it interesting, but in a completely different package of what I'm used to. That is the better nose, 100%. I'm getting a little bit of nail varnish on the nose here for the South African. I'm getting a bourbon influence. I'm getting a nail polish, and there's something else, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And it smells really grainy, almost like wheat, something like that. It's really quite interesting, and I actually can't put my finger on a really good description for it. But I would actually recommend, if you're predominantly a bourbon, a Scottish or an Irish drinker, like I am, mainly Scottish, but both these whiskies are very different, and for the experience of experiencing something different, I think they're both worth it in their own different ways. So we'll start off tasting the Bains. And quickly, just before we do, if you like the videos, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It really helps. So let's taste the Bains. Yeah. So I'm getting a heavy bourbon influence on this whiskey, and what I get in some bourbons is quite a strong nut characteristic, and I'm getting it in the taste on the Bains as well. But there's something else there that takes it away from bourbon, and it's obviously something that's natural to South Africa. And I'm frustrated because I can't put my finger on it for you guys. But I think I prefer it to bourbon. Yeah, I do. There's something there. It's nice. It's not as thin as some cheap bourbons. And this whiskey, just before, I think it's important to mention, I bought this whiskey for £18 in the UK. So it's a cheap whiskey. You know, I think that's $23. It's a cheap whiskey. So I'm comparing it to a cheap bourbon. And for me, it has extra additions to it that make it more interesting and a better experience than some cheaper bourbons. There's a little bit of a nut characteristic coming through. I'd perhaps say like a walnut onto the Japanese. I'm getting like a toffee and fudge note to those quite light notes that I was getting on the nose. That's adding a little bit of depth to the taste now, and it's really nice. So I'm getting the ginger is still coming through, but not as strong on the nose as it is on the taste as it is on the nose. And I would perhaps say that there is some sort of nut note, but not one that I'm used to in whiskey. And I'd perhaps call it more of an almond. And I'm not getting it on the nose, but I am on the taste. That's really quite nice. It's light and aromatic and completely different to what I'm used to. I like it. And the finish is longer than you would imagine as well. With some cheaper bourbons, I'm getting the brown sugar, the caramel, but then a neutral spirit taste. I'm not quite getting it on the Bains. I'm getting the brown sugar, the caramel, but it's a bit more full in the mouth. And there's something else there with that nut note. And it's really quite nice. I would say though, right now, I'm preferring the Kyasuku, the Japanese whiskey. It's just bringing so much more, and also so much more of a newer experience for me. And I'm really enjoying what I'm tasting right now. It is more expensive than the Bains. The Bains is extremely good value for money. I would say if you're a budget bourbon drinker, try the Bains. Really, honestly, you might just prefer it. With the Kyasuku, it's a little bit more expensive, probably around the £35-40 mark. So roughly around twice the price, but that is so cheap that it doesn't necessarily mean that's bad value. And for that new experience, I would actually say they're both good value whiskies. but today the Kyasuku is the one I recommend out of the two. So if you like this whiskey war, a bit of something different with a world whiskey war today, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you for the next whiskey war.